Good evening and welcome back. I'm Britt Hume, and this is On the Record. On a night when the national polling average continues to show a 2-point lead or less for Hillary Clinton, changes in the battleground states point to an easier, though still difficult, path for Donald Trump. The Real Clear average of national polls showed Mrs. Clinton with a 1.3 lead in a two-way race and a 2-point lead in a four-way. Amid reports that betting money is moving to Donald Trump, the odds against him have shrunk to just under 70-30. That's well below what they were just a short time ago. For more now on the state polls and the changes in the Fox News electoral map, we turn to correspondent Shannon Bream.
5 days to go, and the electoral map is shifting again. And all four of the major changes we're seeing this time work in favor of the Trump campaign. New Hampshire, which has leaned consistently Democrat, is now moving into the toss-up column. Ohio, a major electoral prize with 18 votes, has been a yellow toss-up for weeks on this map. Now it shifts into the leaning GOP ranks. And two states we have had classified as leaning GOP now move into the solidly GOP column, both Indiana and Missouri turning dark red. If the vote was held today, would the changes be enough for Trump to win, or does Clinton stay on top? With 270 as the magic number, let's break down the overall map. The solidly GOP and leaning GOP states now total 192 electoral votes together. Those yellow toss-ups across the map, they account for another 63. Combining the solidly Democrat and leaning Democrat states in dark and light blue gets Clinton to 283 electoral college votes. So it is still an uphill battle for Trump to keep all the solid and leaning GOP states, pick up all the toss-ups, including prizes like Florida with 29 votes at stake, and pick off a state that's leaning Democrat, something like Pennsylvania with 20 votes up for grabs. Otherwise, it's a win for Clinton.
Shannon, thank you. So amid all this welter of national and state polling data, what's a voter to do? There's clearly Trump-mentum, you might say, but is it real movement or just the tightening we're accustomed to seeing at the end of a presidential race? Let's ask the pollster and political columnist, Kristen Soltis Anderson. Kristen, nice to see you.
Thank you for having me, Britt.
What do you make of all this? Is this real? Is this the normal tightening? What is it?
I think part of this is that this is a race where people are going into their partisan camps and have had views that have been in place for a long time. That a year ago today, the Real Clear Politics average had this race as a 2-point race between Trump and Clinton, and here we are back at a 2-point race. That some of the fluctuation we see in polls may be about who's winning a news cycle, whether or not Donald Trump has good headlines or bad, whether Hillary Clinton has good headlines or bad. It's not that it's necessarily changing voters' attitudes about the candidates, but it's maybe affecting their enthusiasm for picking up the phone and taking a poll. Now, the question is it affecting their actual enthusiasm for going out to vote? That's the big question that I think remains unanswered.
All right, so as Shannon described the map, if Hillary Clinton hangs on to what she appears now to have, she wins. But Donald Trump is getting closer and closer, and if he won all the old Republican states from 2012, which would include North Carolina, where she may be ahead, and he picked up the states that are toss-ups, he'd get to about, 255 and would still need something else. Does that sound right to you? Is the momentum that he seems to have, if it carried forward, would it get him there in your judgment?
It's still a very hard path for him, and it's going to mean that in states like North Carolina, where the polls now show things incredibly tight, he's going to need to have a turnout advantage that we're not necessarily seeing in early vote data. On the other hand, there are groups that Hillary Clinton really needs to turn out in order to put together the kind of turnout model that's good for her, and we've had reports, the New York Times earlier this week, saying things like African American turnout in certain precincts has been lower in early voting, in part because it's now a little bit harder to early vote in certain areas in North Carolina. So can she make that up on Election Day, or does this mean that she really is facing more of an uphill battle than, say, a Barack Obama election turnout model might suggest?
A lot of people suggest to me, I hear about this all the time, that this year the polls may be wrong because there are shy voters out there that don't want to tell pollsters that they're for Donald Trump, and that there will be a wave of them that will come out on Election Day, perhaps voters that haven't voted very much, if at all, before, that could swing the race. Your thoughts?
There are two different ways to think about a shy Trump voter. The idea that there are voters who support Donald Trump, they're definitely going to vote for him, but they just don't feel like telling a pollster, and they say that they're undecided,
or they
say
don't pick
they're
up the
voting
phone.
for Clinton, or they don't pick up the phone. That may be something that's influenced a lot by what the headlines look like that day, which is why, say, the ABC Washington Post poll, one of the tracking polls that has consistently called the presidential race right, going back to 1992, they're the poll that showed Clinton winning by a 12-point margin about a week and a half ago. That gap then closed to show Trump with a 1-point lead earlier this week. I think they even say in the methodology notes of their polls that some of that's about enthusiasm, that when headlines are really bad for Donald Trump, that you do have those Trump folks deciding, maybe I don't want to pick up the phone and talk about it. But similarly, with the bad news that broke about the Comey letter late last week, you saw the same phenomenon happening with Clinton supporters, where all of a sudden Clinton supporters less willing to take the polls, showing this big shift toward Trump. So in the end, it may not just be shy Trump voters, there may also be shy Clinton voters, and it depends entirely on who's winning the news cycle that day.
Yeah, and I wonder if that effect carries over right on to Election Day.
Well, I think as we get closer to Election Day, people may just be tired of taking polls at all. Bear in mind, there are lots in these swing states, especially lots of get out the vote calls being made, robocalls. The pollster's job gets pretty hard. What we know right now is that this is going to be a tight race. I wouldn't expect to see much change beyond it just being a very, very close race with a very slight Clinton advantage all the way through next Tuesday.
Kristen, thanks very much.
Thanks,
nice
Brett.
to see you. Late this afternoon, WikiLeaks released a fresh batch of Clinton campaign emails. WikiLeaks is calling the rare afternoon release a Huma Abedin FBI and DOJ special. So what's in the emails? Fox Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joins us. Ed?
Well, Brett, good to see you. You know, there's actually not just one, but two document dumps. One at the State Department, largely old emails we had seen before, but there are a couple of new ones, including one that popped up sort of an odd moment in 2010 when Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, was emailing Huma Abedin and saying, I need a secure cell phone. Can you have Anthony Weiner or one of his staffers send it over? I should point out this was when he was still in Congress, and they didn't think that was such a bad thing to do at the time. The WikiLeaks dump, in terms of that, there's a very interesting one in terms of Jen Palmieri saying last year that she is the communications director for Hillary Clinton, of course, now in the campaign. And late last year, she said that James Comey was a bad choice for the FBI director. That's something they said last year, maybe now a little prescient for them. And then there were some more that were a little embarrassing for John Podesta.
WikiLeaks released a 2008 email that might seem slightly ironic. It shows John Podesta was warned about major cyber threats no less than 8 years ago by President Obama's current chief of staff, Dennis McDonough. At the time, McDonough was a national security aide on the Obama campaign. Podesta was chairing the presidential transition. McDonough wrote, quote, I think we should arrange a briefing on the cyber threat for all associated with your effort. We have a real security threat on our stuff here. Then Senator Hillary Clinton was in line to become President Obama's Secretary of State. And despite Podesta's long association with the Clintons, it doesn't appear that she took those concerns too seriously. Quote, strikes me as a big problem that the NYT is having selected emails leaked to them, and I think we should do a call to discuss the proper way to handle, wrote Clinton Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri. When campaign manager Robbie Mook ordered a staffer to schedule a conference call to discuss the fallout, Palmieri fired back this quote, praise Jesus, please do.
Now, another email released by the State Department has Hillary Clinton at one point in 2012 asking her chef, Oscar Flores, quote, what's the name of the new black agent, as in a Secret Service agent? Perhaps she just forgot his name. I'm quite certain Hillary Clinton's team will say this is no big deal. I'm also quite certain if Donald Trump had made the same comment in an email, we'd probably hear about it a little bit longer.
It would be a big deal.
Yeah, probably so.
Ed, thanks very much. Agents investigating the Clintons' various dealings have a slang term they use to describe various elements of the cases. It may tell you something about what they think of it all. Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here and knows what that term is. So, Catherine, what is it?
Well, thank you, Britt. We're learning more about the initial review of Anthony Weiner's computer in that New York sexting case and how that related to the Clinton email investigation. Our contacts say that when the New York agents first went through the computer, they concluded that it had the trifecta of relevant documents. So that was documents from classified information, relevant to the Clinton Foundation, and then also relevant to the Clinton server. So it really covered the waterfront.
So we have the Foundation investigation.
Correct.
And we have the email investigation, which has two pieces of it. One of them being, of course, the server itself and its propriety, and the second one being the possibility that classified information
That's
was
correct.
on the server, which we now know was true.
Correct.
And so three of them put together became, they referred to it as the trifecta.
The trifecta. And what we also know from our reporting is that while the FBI reviewed to determine if their new records is moving down one track, there's a second track which is assessing if there was classified information and whether sources and methods were compromised because that information was on a computer, in this case Anthony Weiner's computer, and it was outside of secure channels. And that's important because that's a real-time implication to this case.
Now, let me go over with you one thing. There's been some dispute today in some quarters of the media as to whether what we reported on this broadcast last night, and Brett Baer's been reporting, that there really is an active investigation that is about the Clinton Foundation,
Yes.
apart from the email investigation and its two phases, that there is also an active investigation on the Clinton Foundation being conducted by various FBI elements.
That's correct.
Well, your understanding on that?
My understanding, based on reporting that goes back to January, that's a story that we broke here on Fox News that had expanded to public corruption and this pay-to-play allegation with the Clinton Foundation, is that FBI agents have been working this case quietly, almost in a background way, out of 4 offices across the country: Southern California, Washington, D.C., Arkansas, as well as New York City.
Am I correct in thinking that they have not gotten what you would call a lot of encouragement from Maine Justice?
Thank you for that question. Where we see the conflict is that these agents feel, just like a reporter feels when they have a big story, that they've got sufficient evidence to warrant a higher level of investigative tools. It's going from a preliminary investigation to a full investigation, if you will. So they want the kinds of tools that you associate with a grand jury, wiretaps, for example. So these agents felt like they were butting their heads against the wall with the Justice Department.
The FBI agents, an FBI agent or a team of agents investigating a case, they don't have the authority to put it before a grand jury, correct?
That's correct. They have to have that permission from the Justice Department, and also the ability to use these tools that take the investigation to the next level. And so in many respects, it's FBI agents feeling that they've made progress in the investigation and there's some there, but then not having the tool that allows them to step up to the next level and make a solid case.
Because of resistance in the Justice Department.
That's their argument, yes.
All right, Catherine, thanks
You're
very
welcome.
much. So, here to react to these developments, our nightly political panel, Jason Riley, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and a Wall Street Journal editorial writer and columnist, and A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics. Well, now we've had this story out for a couple of days. There seems to be more of the Clinton Foundation investigation than we knew, and that it's a more serious investigation than we thought. A.B., your take on this and its political effect?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because I remember Catherine's reporting that there was a 2-track investigation. Actually, the threshold for prosecution for public corruption is lower than the threshold for prosecution for misuse of classified emails. So I thought this whole time that this was continuing apace. And I remember being struck by Chairman Jason Chaffetz asking James Comey in his congressional testimony about his conclusion that there was no prosecutable case and there shouldn't be charges against Hillary Clinton in the email case. In about 6 minutes to go in the testimony, he said, "Is there anything else that you're investigating?" And he said, "I cannot confirm or deny the existence."
Yeah, he was actually asked about. Yeah, he was asked. In fact, was he not, Jason, about whether there was an inquiry going on the Clinton Foundation, and he declined to answer that question. He said, "I can't comment on any other investigations."
I think it's encouraging that the Clinton Foundation is being investigated. A lot of people in the media, including the Wall Street Journal, had wondered for a long time, why wasn't this happening? Or we had argued that it should be happening. It smelled. This whole arrangement smelled from the beginning, and I'm glad someone at the FBI recognized that and was looking into it.
Now, what do you make of the apparent hesitancy at Maine Justice, which, after all, as Catherine has just pointed out, has to make the call as to whether to convene a grand jury, which is quite a powerful tool, or to authorize, if it's appropriate, I'm not sure it would be in this case, wiretaps, but that those tools, the FBI agents can't get the tools.
Well, these field agents, I think, are doing their job. This is what they're supposed to do. And it looks like the political appointees are the ones that were pushing back against what they were finding. So this is an internal debate that was going on in the FBI and the Justice Department. But I think think the field agents were doing what they thought. In fact, you know, where they started is not where they wound up. They just followed the leads as they went. Some people, the story in the Wall Street Journal said that a book had been published, and they followed up on some of the sources
that's right.
in the book.
It was the Peter Schweizer book called Clinton Cash, right?
Exactly.
And they used that as a kind of a map.
Yeah. They interviewed the author of the book and found out, and just followed the leads where they took them. And then someone in Washington, Justice Department, started pushing back. Oh, no, there's nothing here. Cut it out. And that's where you started to have this conflict.
A.B., you can kind of imagine, at least, an official at the Justice Department, particularly a political appointee, finding out that the FBI was following leads provided by Peter Schweizer's hated book, at least as far as the Clinton camp is concerned, and thinking, well, wait a minute, this isn't what we ought to be doing.
But it wouldn't take an FBI agent to figure out that if you were double dealing between the State Department, your duties as Secretary of State, and your top staff at the State Department and the Clinton Foundation, that you would have a private server to hide all those documents, and the 33,000 that you deleted would be the foundation emails. They wouldn't be, stuff about this leader in Saudi Arabia, and so, or yoga, and so that was the suspicion all along, was that the private server was there to have those communications, then they were deleted because they would stink. And so this entire investigation really has been mishandled, and people are mad at James Comey now. But this is an investigation where they immunized five people. You don't do that unless you're going to bring a charge. There never was a grand jury. They never searched the foundation or her home. None of these devices were turned over. I mean, it's extraordinarily questionable from start to finish.
And the most extraordinary part, I still think, is Obama's statement yesterday. You don't do that. You don't comment on an ongoing investigation, or even imply the way he did in that interview he gave about this ongoing investigation. I think that was way out of line. People are talking about how abnormal everything is in terms of the campaign and the two candidates. It starts at the top with the president in this case.
Jason, A.B., don't go away. In the final days until the election, both campaigns are putting in overtime as they crisscross the country. We've seen this before. And even Melania Trump is out on the trail. She hadn't done that in a while, if indeed at all. That's next. Also, Obamacare premiums are about to spike across the U.S. We look into price hikes in one major swing state coming up. So what was the rest of the Trump campaign up to today? Fox's campaign Carl Cameron is live in Selma, North Carolina, where Donald Trump is about to hold a rally. Hey, Carl, you're not inside amid all the noise. Good to see you.
Thanks very much, Britt. Nice to be able to hear you. Tonight, Trump will be campaigning with a number of Medal of Honor recipients and emphasizing his plans to fix the Veterans Administration and rebuild the military. This is, again, part of his sort of courtship of a variety of constituencies. And North Carolina's got a lot of military bases, a lot of active and retired military here. So that's one of the things that he's doing. The other thing is he's definitely seized on the Fox News reporting that the charitable foundation is still under investigation, and used that in rallies today, and intends to continue to do so in what's going to be a very, very busy weekend. 11 states between tomorrow and Sunday, with 2, 3, 4 rallies a day. This morning, Trump was here in Concord, North Carolina, and he went after that new investigative information about the Clinton Foundation. Watch.
It was reported that the FBI is conducting a criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton's pay at the State Department. They say, the Federal Bureau, that it's likely to yield a very, very serious charge or an indictment.
And it's going to be a very busy weekend. Of course, if there was to be any more bombshells dropped, usually they fall on Wednesday or Thursday night. By Friday on the weekend, it's pretty much sprint to Tuesday. And the Trump campaign's got a big, big plan. Again, he's going to hit 11 states between tomorrow and Sunday. At the same time, the Republican National Committee is ramping up its operations. They're going to put out over 100,000 volunteers. They plan to knock on somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 million doors this weekend. And there'll be many, many more millions of phone calls made. This is part of their joint task force, their joint efforts together. And the Trump campaign needs a big outing from them. They know that in terms of personnel and money, they're outgunned by the Democrats. So the RNC's efforts this weekend may be a big, big difference and a big, big impact on how things go on Tuesday. Brett?
All right, Carl. Thanks very much. Hillary Clinton is also spending time in the key battleground state of North Carolina. In just a short time, she'll get on stage with her one-time rival, Senator Bernie Sanders, that in Raleigh, North Carolina. That's where we find Fox News correspondent Jennifer Griffin. Hi, Jennifer. Well, you're in the event, I see, not on the bus. It's nice to see you. What's going on there?
Well, Britt, behind me is Democratic Senate candidate Deborah Ross. Hillary Clinton will be taking the stage with Bernie Sanders not long from now. The latest Quinnipiac poll here in North Carolina shows Hillary Clinton up by 3 points, but other polls show it to be a much closer race here, and that is why she is bringing out the big guns like Sanders, as well as Grammy Award winner Pharrell Williams. He was on her campaign plane just a little while ago, and there was an awkward moment on the tarmac when he emerged from the plane with her. And in fact, Donald Trump's plane landed at about the same time, so they had to walk by that plane. So both candidates very close together here in North Carolina. Here's what Hillary Clinton said not long ago.
Donald Trump was endorsed by the official newspaper of the Ku Klux Klan. Do any of us have a place in Trump's America? It's not just about communities of color. That is not who America is, and we're not going to let it ever go back to that.
Clinton has had a weaker turnout among African-American voters than President Obama did in 2012. It's one of the reasons the president was here yesterday and hit the trail hard today in Florida for her.
If you accept the support of Klan sympathizers before you're in office, you'll accept their support while in office.
Stronger together. Her running mate just gave a speech entirely in Spanish in Arizona. Tim Kaine spoke there moments ago. That is where Clinton was just this morning. We were there with her, Britt. She had her largest, most enthusiastic crowd last night, many of them Latinos who are turning out at a rate of 3 to 1 compared to 2012. Also of note, Britt, the campaign says that they don't think that they're polling as well as they could be in North Carolina because the limited number of early polling stations here in North Carolina until recently had kept the African-American vote down. They think that is shifting now, and they also said that the courts have now ruled that you can register to vote on the same day, all the way up until Election Day on November 8th. Also to point out that President Obama and Michelle Obama will be joining Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and Chelsea Clinton on the eve of the election on Monday, November 7th in Philadelphia. It shows that that will be their closing argument in Philadelphia, where the Democrats, of course, held their convention. Back to you.
Jennifer, thank you. Now back to a swing state where both candidates are fighting for every vote. It's a place where Obamacare is in trouble. As part of our continuing series, Fox News correspondent Rob Schmidt investigates Obamacare premium hikes in North Carolina.
With just 5 days left until the election, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are crisscrossing the Tar Heel state. With 15 electoral votes up for grabs, nearly 2.5 million people have already voted in North Carolina, up 25% from this time in the 2012 election. One issue at the top of voters' minds is health care. And in this key swing state, Obamacare premiums are spiking, on average 40%. In Greensboro alone, premiums are up 51%. A typical 27-year-old from North Carolina will see his or her average premium in the Silver plan jump from $319 a month up to $446, or about $3,800 up to $5,400 a year. The reason? The amount of insurers across the state is dropping. People there will go from having a slim choice of 3 to now just 2. And remember when President Obama said this?
If you like your plan, you can keep your plan.
Well, that may not be true across most of North Carolina. In 95 out of 100 counties, people just have one insurer to choose from.
Well, the Real Clear Politics average in North Carolina shows Clinton and Trump in a dead heat. In 2012, Mitt Romney won the Tar Heel state, but right now the Fox News electoral scorecard shows it leaning Democrat. Britt.
Thanks very much, Rob. And the 2016 race has shaken the conservative movement to its core. Can it put itself back together? George will discuss that next. Plus, the FBI leaks about the Clintons are sending Democrats into a tizzy. But suppose the investigation had a different target. That subject is coming up. Not very long ago, there was a conservative movement united around a handful of positions: low taxes, light regulation, spending restraint, a strong and assertive defense and foreign policy, upholding of traditional values, and opposition to abortion. There was more to it than that, but you get the idea. Today, with the nomination of Donald Trump, those ideas no longer hold the movement together. The question arises, win or lose, what happens to conservatism in America? Let's ask one of its most noted chroniclers, the columnist George Will. Hi, George.
Glad to be with you.
Your thoughts about whether this movement will come back together? Will conservatives to forgive each other after this and rally together again?
A general amnesty like Appomattox?
Exactly.
Well, we'll see. Conservatives have to deal with two things, and they're related: tone and substance. The tone of conservatism has become angry. We have not elected a really angry man president since Andrew Jackson. I'm not sure the American people who are bewildered, sad, confused, annoyed, but I'm not sure we are an angry nation, and conservatism right now presents an angry face.
It was certainly true, though, in the primaries there were candidates who struck a posture that was not angry. John Kasich did, Jeb Bush did. There were others. Didn't work.
That's right, but the primary process rewards intense minorities, not the majority of the country, and that's another thing the Republicans and the conservatives have to deal with, is the process by which they select their candidates. Then there's the substance. You mentioned it, reciting there the catechism. Limited government, low spending. No one in this campaign has talked about entitlements other than Donald Trump to say that Social Security must not be touched and Medicare must not be touched. Well, since entitlements are 67% of the federal budget, he's saying they shouldn't be touched. Low taxes. Mr. Trump is for protectionism, that is tariffs. Tariffs are taxes levied at the border. And when you endorse protectionism, you're endorsing a whole apparatus of government, industrial policy, the government selling Americans what they can buy, in what quantities, and at what prices. That's hardly conservatism.
Well, what about the ill will that exists between the Trump and non-Trump camps? Now, that issue, immigration is another issue that's been a dividing point. Immigration, and that relates to trade, are the two areas where Trump diverges from the old Republican orthodoxy. But in most of the people who support Trump, they want a strong defense. They'd like to see taxes lowered, traditional values, anti-abortion. They're together on all those things, and yet in terms of how they feel about each other right now, they are miles apart. Can that divide be healed?
Well, the test is going to be, and it may be a test they all flunk, is immigration. The Republican Party is facing right now what Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina calls a demographic death spiral. That is, the Republican strategy, and it's really quite explicitly Donald Trump's strategy this time around, is to get an ever larger portion of a declining portion of the electorate, white voters. They're just reaching the limits of that. Look at, Texas, Arizona, Georgia, states that are now turning slowly, and in some cases quickly, purple. If the Republicans don't have a way of attracting minorities, they cannot win in modern America, period.
So, in other words, even if you posit that the white vote reaches a kind of a maximum level for the Republican Party, which would mean an awful lot of white liberals would have to suddenly decide to vote Republican, you're going to be overwhelmed by the growing minority.
Every 4 years, the white portion of the electorate shrinks about 2.6 points.
Right.
In 1988, the last time the Republicans won an emphatic victory, the last time they won more than 300 electoral votes, George Herbert Walker Bush against Michael Dukakis. George Herbert Walker Bush got 59% of the white vote, which is high, and that translated into 426 electoral votes. In 2012, Mitt Romney also got 59% of the white vote. That translated into 206 electoral votes.
Now, the thing, George, it strikes me that what the party will need in the aftermath of this, and Mr. Trump will be the leader of it if he wins, and that will run its course. If the party loses, as seems to be likely, although it's certainly not certain, is a leader. Do you see a leader on the horizon?
The highest-ranking Republican in this country is Paul Ryan, and he has an insurgency that is, if not quite bane for his hide at this point, certainly unsatisfied with him. So the answer is, you're right, you can't beat something with nothing, and there's nothing out there right now.
George, thank you. Nice to see you. With you. And FBI information about the Clintons' investigations trigger a certain type of news coverage. We're going to discuss that news coverage with our nightly panel next. Since James Comey let it be known that the FBI was once again looking into Hillary Clinton's emails, most of the coverage of that whole event has been about James Comey. Would this have been true if the object of the FBI's investigation were a Republican? Our panel reconvenes. Jason Riley, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics. All right, let's posit for a moment that this was an investigation into some Republican politician, and word got out from the FBI that the investigation was ongoing. Would the coverage, A.B., in your judgment, have been focused on the investigator or the investigatee?
Well, I think it would depend on the investigatee. If it was someone like Hillary Clinton, for whom emails are spread all around the world, I think if I go into some boxes in my attic, I'm going to find some emails that she didn't turn over to the State Department. Because there was no substance in the letter, immediately the focus turned to how could he have done this with 11 days to go and not tell us what it really means. And then you have Republicans weighing in.
But wouldn't you think that that would trigger an all-out effort by the investigative reporters of Washington and elsewhere to find out what might be in the emails rather than an investigation?
Well, I think they've been trying, but really? What he did was unorthodox and he broke with protocol. And the problem for...
When's the last time that FBI protocol mattered to investigative journalists in Washington?
What I'm saying is that he becomes the focus, and the Clinton campaign can keep him the focus when the Judiciary Committee Chairman, Senator Grassley, Jim Jordan, a Freedom Caucus guy who was on the Benghazi Committee, who went after her, in 11 hours of testimony, when Alberto Gonzales, the former AG of the Bush administration, and on, Michael Mukasey, all come out and say what he did was wrong.
Go ahead, Jason.
There's a lot of hypocrisy to go on here, to go around, I should say. The Clinton partisans are upset because the leaks are hurting Clinton. And then you have a media that is upset about the leaks because they're for Clinton by and large. But we all know that the media is, leaks are the bread and butter of the press.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, where would we be without them? So this idea that they are upset about the existence of these leaks is not the real issue.
Yeah,
the issue is who the leaks are helping.
I can't help but remember when it came out after many years of nobody knowing who Deep Throat was, the famous source for Woodward and Bernstein, particularly Woodward, whose investigation brought down a president of the United States, a Republican, Richard Nixon. And it came out that the guy, we just learned this a few years ago, way after the fact, that the guy was a senior FBI official named Mark Felt. There's a picture of him on the screen right now. Do you recall at the time there being indignation in the media anywhere that someone from the FBI was leaking? I don't. Am I wrong?
No, I don't. Look, I think the press covered this story, but as I said, in the absence of any substance about what this was about, on Friday, we didn't even know it was about the foundation.
The outrage is selective here, and that's to me is the problem. I mean, the left is upset about the WikiLeaks because they're hurting Clinton. Where was the outrage over the Access Hollywood leaks? Where was the outrage? Where was the outrage over Trump's tax return being leaked to the New York Times?
Well, are you talking about the left or the press? Because the press has been covering WikiLeaks.
The left, the same people complaining about WikiLeaks.
Okay, that's different than the
where
press.
Was there outrage over Access Hollywood? You've had a partisan running a super PAC, David Brock, saying he will pay money if people leak more of the Access Hollywood tapes. He'll pay them money. He'll pay their legal fees. He said, are these same people complaining about the WikiLeaks complaining about that? I mean,
well,
again,
that's not
the outrage is selective here.
That's not the media covering the leaks, though. I don't understand what. I mean, Donald Trump asked the Russians to hack more into her emails and find them. I mean, I think that, as you said, there's a lot of hypocrisy to go around. But it's one thing for the left to focus on James Comey, but I think that the press actually focused on it intensely. It was all weekend long, a totally breathless coverage. And it shifted to the fact that he broke with protocol. It was unorthodox.
I would say that within 24 hours, the coverage was all about Comey and how he had behaved and whether it was, and the stories were at length about that. Now, look, my view of this is that it was inevitable that the complaints about Comey would make news and get covered, which I think is totally inevitable and appropriate. The question is whether the curiosity about what might be the substance and what we know about the foundation and all of that would be renewed by that, and it doesn't seem to have been. That's just my only thought.
I think that between WikiLeaks and her plunging poll numbers. All of this has been covered, but there's a lot of, as you said, there's a lot of discordant views about whether or not the FBI is actually actively pursuing something on the Clinton Foundation, and something will happen in terms of an indictment soon and all that. But that's all being covered.
AB, Jason, thank you. And coming up, a major announcement about this program sparked a lot of reaction on Twitter. You'll hear the announcement plus some of the mean tweets that followed. There was a big reaction on Twitter today to my joyful tweet that Tucker Carlson has been named to take over this show after the election. Most of the reaction was positive toward both of us, for which we are certainly grateful, but not all. J.B. Clemson said, quote, "Britt, that's the best news since hearing that your job on the record was temporary." And someone called Justice Splice tweeted, "That's awesome, way better choice than the current host." Southern 12 said in part, "I just got used to you. You're a pretty good guy, but you were right. Tucker Carlson is an excellent choice."